On today's episode of Locked On Suns, part 1 of our 13 questions that will define the Phoenix Suns season preview series, starting with Devin Booker. What is the path for Book to be a top 5 player in the NBA this season? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. We're treating this as the official start, so it is number 7 for me. I'm a writer at Suns.com and the host of the Just Basketball Show as well, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Please hit follow and subscribe. Make it your first listen if you don't already. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Just hit that button, get us in your feed every Monday through Friday. We're also back to daily in conjunction with the start of the season preview series. So become an everydayer all the way through the month of September into the start of training camp and the regular season shortly thereafter. Should be a fun ride. Let's get it started. Brendon Dueñas is joining us as he does every Monday. You can read his stuff at Bright Side of the Sun. They will be covering all of the lead up as well. And we're bringing the series back. I don't know if you did any of these with me, Brandon, the first time. I didn't do it last year because there was too much Durant and Sarver stuff, but I did it the year after they made the finals. And it's a nice way to dive in and get a little bit of a feel for a whole bunch of different elements of the team. We also have the little ode to Steve Nash thrown in there with the number 13. So, good all around. But before we get into any of that, happy belated birthday. And I want to shout out the people who came up to you in the public world. And do you have their names? Did you get their names? Can we shout them out here?
I got one of their names. I can't remember the other one though. Aaron, shout out to you, and whoever the other one is. Sorry, I forgot your name. But yeah, it was pretty cool to meet some listeners in like real life. So I've had some like Twitter mutuals at Suns games and stuff before, but this is the first like locked on shout out I've received. So I thought that was pretty cool. So shout out to you guys. Thanks for listening. And yeah, it
is cool. I met a dude named Kenny at the grocery store right after the Durant trade, and I don't know if I ever shouted him out. I assume he lives near me because he's at the same grocery store as me. So shout out Kenny as well. But yeah, if you ever see us, say hello. I'm surprised I don't get more people at games, honestly, because that would be the place that it would happen. But regardless, let's dive into Devin Booker. Number 1 question of our 13 question series. What is the path for Devin Booker to be top 5 in the NBA this upcoming season? We'll start with offense. And what I will throw your way, Brandon, let's start with even within the offense, the shot selection. And it's not to criticize what the shot selection is. That's going to sound bad, but it is just to break down what it's going to look like, what it has looked like. I think the high jumper frequency for Booker, it's just par for the course at this point. That's what he's going to do. But he's one of the few guys in the NBA who can justify it because he's so good at knocking down difficult shots, mid-range shots, contested threes, pull-up threes, all of those types of things that, a lot of coaches would tell lesser players to not take. But to me, the key development we saw from him last year in the regular season, and it carried on into the playoffs, was just a slight, it wasn't huge, but it was noticeable in the stats, his rim frequency and his foul drawing. And it doesn't have to be much, but I think even just maintaining what he did last year, maybe even a little bit higher yet still, would just give his game a little more balance, make him a little bit less predictable and harder to guard. And obviously it goes a long way when it comes to efficiency when you're getting easier shots and not having to take those really tough ones quite as often. So when I thought about his offense, that's kind of where I started. What do you think about that? And kind of where would you be looking for Book offensively if he's going to have a season that puts him in that top 5 status?
Yeah, so I think rim frequency and finishing, that's a good place to start, a good foundation. And I don't think the leap needs to be, like you said, too dramatic, just getting incrementally better in that area. But I think the thing that jumps out to me is the 3-point percent. Like we saw when he was on first team All-NBA a couple seasons ago, that his 3-point percentage was at 38.3, which is a a career high for him. So I think getting closer to 40% from distance, that's kind of where not only is he going to get better looks playing with Beal and Durant, hopefully, but I think it's a realistic goal for him to try to get that 50, 40, 90 club. Like that's one of those selling points, I think, offensively. If he can really just have a historically efficient offensive season, then it's going to come down to efficiency for him. So I think that's one area I look at, and just getting a little bit better everywhere else. Like he seems to do every season. So it's not like it's not, we already kind of picked at this a little bit, but it's like, he doesn't need to take a huge leap anywhere because he just does this every year where he gets a little bit better at everything. And that's pretty much what it's going to come down to.
And that's honestly, I mean, we're not going to talk too much about like, oh, what are the other four guys? And like, top five is relative, and a lot of it's based on health and different things. So it's not
narratives and all that.
Exactly. It's not like it's some sort of, trophy they give out. You're a top five player, but I think that's more than a lot of players in this stratosphere can say, that he gets better like that. That's not true of every player, even young guys, and there's like, I think of a lot of guys in the top 10-ish area where I'm like, I don't really know if what I would say they've added to their game in the past few seasons. So I think, narrative and just whatever it is, like, I think that goes a long way for him. But let's talk about kind of play context too. So specifically like transition is what I mean by that. And last year in the playoffs, the Suns increased their transition frequency by about 2% from the regular season, which, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about possession by possession over the whole course of games and series and all that, that is a lot. And that was a big part of how Book was able to be efficient, both as a scorer and what I'll get to next, which is as a passer, getting assists. And so to me, like, that's one of the main things I'm looking for from Vogel. And he spoke to it in an interview last week that we talked about a little bit on the show, is he doesn't want to have to set an offense and run super sophisticated half-court sets very often. If in his ideal world, like, they could create a turnover on every defensive possession and get a run out, that's not going to happen, but that's what he wants. So to me, Book has always been one of the best transition scorers in the NBA. And I would expect if they can increase yet another level on that transition stuff, like, that'll add handful of points and a lot more efficiency to his game too. So that was one thing that I figure we might see this year that maybe we haven't seen before, because the Suns were not a very aggressive transition team last regular season, even with Booker getting to the rim more, getting to the foul line more. You add that in and it's like, wow, you're getting another bump there.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the main reason why Chris Paul leaving is going to open up so many different possibilities for what their offense could be, not only in transition, just even in the half court, just like organized chaos. It's kind of what I feel like when they're at their best, when they're making the defense move and scramble, and they're not too organized and everything's like not as methodical and calculated like Chris Paul. Don't get me wrong, in the playoffs, it's helpful to have that type of, those half court sets where you can kind of dissect the defense and pick them out. In the regular season, I think sometimes it's better to just let the young guys run, and they got a younger roster this year. I think they're going to try to get out and transition more, get easy buckets. And I think that's definitely another area where Booker can feast in transition. We've seen some of the finishes he can make and how quick he runs the floor. I think he's one of the most underrated, just explosive end-to-end athletes in the league. Like it's kind of like deceptive until you see it up close. And then he'll run by like three defenders and just do a little reverse layup in transition. So I think seeing more of that's definitely another area that he can tap into.
Last thing, and I guess I didn't say this at the beginning, and again, we talked about the top five thing can be a little arbitrary. Everybody's going to have their opinion, but basically in the NBA, you have to have one of these to win the championship. Like, that tends to be the case. And, I think you would have said Booker was at that point in the postseason last year. It wouldn't have surprised anybody if he had led the team to a championship and they just lost to Denver, and that was that. So, he's not going to do what he did in the second round or in the playoffs. I mean, in those two rounds again, but it's just about, 82 games and then adjusting coming playoff time. And I think obviously the point we have to hit on the offensive end as part of that is the passing. And I think he will be, have the ball in his hands more. I think we've talked about that plenty. But I dug into the numbers a little bit more. And first of all, I want to say last week, I think it was you and I did the one improvement each key player can make episode. And I talked about his lob passing and hitting the roll man and stuff. And people push back on me in the comments, and I did dig into it a little bit. I guess I was wrong. He actually, Ayton was the guy he assisted the most in the regular season, but it did drop off in the playoffs. As Book's assists went up, the number of them that went to Ayton kind of went down. And to me, that felt like it was more going to shooters and in transition. And the numbers kind of back that up. But the Basketball Index does a lot of good stuff where they try to break down and create other ratings rather than just like assists, potential assists, whatever. And they have this thing called passing efficiency. And that's where he graded out the worst. And what that stat basically does is it has high value assists and then bad pass turnovers. And it compares those relative to how ball dominant a player is in their role. So Book was in the 47th percentile, so the bottom half of the league. And I think where a lot of that comes from, and my kind of main point as a passer, is I think what would take him from very good as a passer to like maybe great as a passer and playmaker is to be a little less predictable with where he's going with the ball, get a few more of those high value assists rather than just making the obvious right play, which a lot of players can't do, but that's, again, good to great. And then turning the ball over less, and especially those passes we know Book makes from time to time where they just soar into the third row, or, you know, he kind of has tunnel vision and a guy's not where he thought he was. It's only one or two a game, but again, you're talking about good to great. That's one area where I could see it going down. And if he cleans some of that up, I think you would see that stat improve for him. And I think he would start to be thought of as like, I don't know, whatever you think of as the best 2-guard passers in the league, you know, maybe Book starts to be talked about in that class more so than kind of, yeah, pretty good for what he is, you know, which is, I think, what people think now.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think in terms of some of his passing, like he does make the right play, and sometimes it can be predictable, but even though it's predictable, he'll still make the right play and it results in a bucket. But I think sometimes when he gets in trouble is when he's looking too hard to get a shot, and then it's almost like a bailout pass, which that's going to happen. Anytime you're a high volume shot creator, like you're going to run into those tough situations, and it's easy to sit here and say like, oh, you need to make the right pass in those high pressure moments. But I think that's where that number can improve a lot for him. And I think especially just being a little more crafty with his passes, like maybe doing some ball fakes, like even if it throws his teammates off a little bit, just kind of switching it up a little bit to keep the defense on their toes so he's not as predictable. Like that's really the only hole in his game where he doesn't do a lot of flashy passing, which sometimes that can backfire for sure. But I think it can also create, like I said, just that unpredictability where the defense doesn't know where he's going next. And so incorporating some new stuff with his how he passes and his reads, predetermining like where players are going to be, stuff like that. Just little stuff that I think he definitely has in him. Like he has that court vision, but when it's late in the shot clock, we know Booker's trying to get a shot like more often than not. So trying to have those contingency plans in place when he's making those, 2 or 3 series moves and he gets doubled last second, stuff like that.
Yeah. I'll just say, like, I'm excited to watch it, right? Like, I think you and I both are coming from a place of like, it's been a while since he's gotten to kind of play around and take on new challenges and try to improve that way. I think we can all agree he pretty much maxed out and mastered what his role was in the Chris Paul centered version of this thing. And we saw a taste in the postseason of what it can look like. And I think a whole regular season to read what defenses are doing and kind of, it's like when the superhero gets his powers for the first time in a superhero movie and they like run around the city just like blowing stuff up. Like that's kind of what we're going to be seeing. So I'm excited. Let's talk about defense next and talk about matchups, role, what can we expect from what he did last postseason to roll into the regular season and more. First, today's show brought to you by Ibotta. It's officially summer, and as we wrap up the summer, lots of sales. We just had Labor Day, but your closet shouldn't be the only thing growing when you make those purchases. Now you can also watch your cash back grow with each purchase by using Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after shopping to get that cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 back per year. That could cover the cost of an entire additional shopping trip, or you could use it to buy that flight you've been eyeing, the game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can also earn cash back to hundreds of online brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, and use the code LOCKED when you do. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED when you register. All right, we're keeping it rolling. I think defensively, there's a little less layers to what he's going to be asked to do here, Devin Booker, as we ask what he has to do to get to be a top 5 player in the league this year, Brandon. But I'll start with matchups. I again dug into some numbers here. Russell Westbrook shot 3% worse when guarded by Booker in the first round than his overall stats in that series, and 5 of his 20 turnovers came when guarded by Book, which I believe is the most of any single player, but I didn't check everybody. Jamal Murray shot worse than 35% from the field when guarded by Booker in the second round. These stats aren't perfect because they just measure it by whoever was closest when the player took a shot. That's not always who was actually guarding that player. It can sometimes just be a broken play, and then it's like Booker's 3 feet away in the wrong direction when Russell Westbrook shoots, and then he gets counted. But it's the best we can do. And then I think maybe most importantly from the playoffs, he increased his blocks and steals, which we all know, but he did it without fouling more than normal. Like, his fouls were basically steady despite being more aggressive, despite taking on tougher matchups. So I don't know what that tells me, because I think in the past I would have thought Booker was better guarding bigger guys. And then that's 2 guards that he had a lot of success against. So what did last year's playoffs teach you? Did it change your mind? Did it make you think, let's put him in this position versus another position if you're Frank Vogel? Like, what's your main takeaway coming off of that run for him a few months later?
So I wouldn't say it changed my mind, but it definitely kind of reinforced some of what I thought he had, but like when it comes to defensive potential in terms of just the on-ball stuff, some of the off-ball stuff we saw too. Like, it was that Clippers series really was kind of his coming out party defensively. Like, it seemed like he was everywhere, like on both ends. Like, I think just the conditioning he was in, like that was really where I think some of the narrative nationally started to shift a little bit too, with, even though it's still way too late for this. Like, that just shows you how tough it is for some of these guys to change that narrative of not even like that he's a great defender or anything, just going from being labeled that bad defender to like liability. And now like people say he's average, maybe slightly above average, but I think
just the number of people, if you were to ask like who's a better defender between Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker, I think everybody in an instant would say Donovan Mitchell, and it's like, watch the games, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Those early career narratives, and like it's not just Booker on defense. There's so many other players that have had trouble shedding whatever they're kind of like anointed early in their careers. So, but yeah, just watch the games, as you said. And I think Booker has another level that he can tap into on defense, especially as I think Beal and Durant will as well, just with the lighter workload offensively. And that's what I'm really excited to see. I think Beal, not to get too off topic, but I think he's also going to surprise some people defensively in this system, and just the competitive nature that these guys have. Like, I think that's kind of what, even early in his career, like is why I had confidence in Booker's defense coming around, is I think you put him in the right system. He's a competitor. He's not going to want to get beat one-on-one. Like, he takes it personal. So I think that attitude is why he can guard those guards. But I think the type of guard he'll struggle with is just those, and this is like anyone in the NBA really defensively, is those Ja Morants or explosive guards that can get to the rim and that are shifty. Like that's where I think he'll struggle a little bit. But like anyone he can keep up with, like when it comes to just step for step, like stay in front of, like I think he can do an excellent job on.
Agreed on all counts. I would say to kind of segue into the other part of this that I wanted to talk about, which is his kind of role, but also like where he is in the pecking order of a lineup defensively. I would say the success he had against some guards, and he also was pretty good against Eric Gordon. I didn't put the stats in there, but did well there. And I think when he was guarding Gordon was when Gordon started to have less of an impact on the series, frankly. So good stuff, obviously, on that one. But I would say that whole kind of evolution we saw, because you talk about when he broke out defensively or when people maybe should have paid attention. To me, I feel like the turning point, I mean, being able to be on a good defensive team as soon as, really Monty got here, I think should have helped. But especially when I was, we're all watching and analyzing the finals, and I was like, he's the best option on Middleton, that series. And at that point I was like, okay, if I'm actually there with it and I truly believe that in a late round of a final series, he's the best player to be guarding the best scorer on the opposing team, like I probably should reevaluate what I think of him. And I did. And since then I've pretty much been high on him, but that was Middleton, right? Not Russ or Murray. So I guess all that to say, I think I'm kind of excited looking forward because I think they'll switch a lot this year, probably even more than they did under Monty, just based on personnel more than anything. And I think he'll be able to handle any type of matchup, and that's a really big luxury to have. And, he was probably like the third best wing defensive option in previous years, whether that was Bridges and Crowder or Bridges and Cam Johnson, Bridges and Okogie at times. And he might be the best in a lot of lineups this year, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but he probably won't be starting on opposing teams' best players. It's just when he has to guard them, no matter who it is, I feel pretty comfortable. And that matters. I mean, if your scheme is going to be to switch and your best player can be maximized by doing that, then again, you're kind of on your way to top 5 player type of stuff. Like that's kind of the baseline. They don't have to be game changers if they're so good offensively. So I think Booker will be, one of the better defenders that we talk about in that top 5, top 10 status in the league.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why, and I'm guilty of this too, just because, we dissect the Suns so much that you start to think about things a little bit. And like when it comes to the on-ball point of attack defense, it's like, that's kind of like the big red flag, but it might not matter, honestly. Like it will matter, but not as much as we think, just because of what Vogel does with how switch heavy they are, with how they stay at home and how they're going to cover their assignments. Like it, obviously point of attack defense and fighting over screens would be nice to have that in addition to what they have already. But I think their size, their length, and their ability to be able to handle those one-on-one matchups, 1 through 5 and in a lot of switching scenarios, like I think that's really going to launch them into that top 15, hopefully top 10 defense in the regular season, and potentially higher if we really get a great season out of Ayton and Durant stays healthy and all these other factors. But yeah, I think you're right on the money there. Like there's Booker in this system too, I think could take another step forward and Vogel could bring out the best in him. Like we talk about the rim protectors all the time, but like, I think it's going to be across the board that his system kind of benefits a lot of these guys.
All right. I will say, to close things out, I would, this has been a lot of positivity. I would say that the biggest things to me that I would want him to maybe take a step forward in that we haven't quite seen, especially when we're thinking about what this scheme will look like. Off-ball switching. I don't know how much they'll do that, but if they do a lot of it, and every team does it to some amount, and what his help assignments are off of that switching, those things are kind of higher level team defense stuff that we know he does lose focus on at times. He can be beat. He can lose track of the shooter he's supposed to be, keeping track of and everything else. If he can do that also, then like you're talking about a legitimately valuable wing defender in the league. That's kind of everything you could ask of from him. But the off-ball stuff, I think, and most stars are like this. Most perimeter stars are like this. They just make mistakes, but if he can limit those, I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get caught ball watching sometimes in those corners, like especially with how explosive NBA athletes are. Like it's and you have that workload that Booker has, like it's going to happen, but just limiting those, like you said, and trying to, I think anytime the ball's on his side of the court, like everyone in that vicinity, like I feel confident Booker is going to know what to do, but anytime it's at those weak side rotations, sometimes you could see him falling asleep. So I think that's another area, that's just really more of staying locked in. I think we didn't see that a ton in the playoffs, but in the regular season, like we even saw some from Durant in the playoffs where he fell asleep on those, and it's just going to happen from time to time, but pretty much trying to limit those as much as you can, because that's really what the goal is. So.
All right, let's go to off the court to close it out and talk about leadership, health, little MVP odds talk after one more quick break. All right, we're closing out the show. Number 1 in our 13 questions that will define the Phoenix Suns season preview series. The question being, what is the pathway to Devin Booker being a top 5 player for the Suns this season as they try to win a championship, which history tells us you need one of those to win. We'll go off the court, and feel free to jump in or disagree. I feel like I've been dominating. I did maybe too much research on this one, Brandon, so you can take us wherever you would like. But I'll just start with leadership. And I just think, to me, it might be an exaggeration to say it was the coolest thing, but one of the really cool things about last year's postseason run for Booker was how you saw the confidence of being, historically great on the court really translate to being a vocal leader as well in game, which is just something we didn't see from him a ton. You would always hear it, like, different guys would say, oh yeah, Booker, he speaks up when he needs to. He leads by example. We kind of all have that level of respect because we know he's our best player. We know he's one of our best players, but you didn't always see it if you were just watching games. And I think over the course of last season, you started to. You combine that with how deferential I think like Beal and Durant have already been. DA has always kind of been that way. The young players on this team, like, of course they're going to do that. Like, you're kind of just on your way to that ingredient being there too. Like, this guy is the center of this whole thing right now. It's like him and Matt Ishbia. That's what this all revolves around. And it feels like he's ready to take that on, like, with everything it means, more so than just like kind of going to work every day and being great. It's like, you don't have to, but it helps if you are a vocal leader. And I feel like he's going to take that step this year.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we saw some flashes of it last year, more on a more consistent basis, like you mentioned. And I think to be that top dog, like on a team with Durant and Beal, like, obviously Durant's not really that kind of leader. He's more of he just likes to hoop, just have fun. Like, he'll obviously encourage his teammates, and he'll have leadership moments, but he's not a leader in that sense. That I think Booker has the mentality, the mindset of being that guy. And Beal, I think Beal also is like one of those quiet leaders where he'll do stuff as well that I think will help some of these younger guys. But he's not going to take over or dominate that. But I think, yeah, like you said, the path is right there for him to really, for this to be his year and make that leap on the leadership scale. And I think this is around the time where a lot of in these guys' career, like, he's 26, he's turning 27 here in October. So I think he's entering that era of his career where he's going to be the guy, and he's the reason all these guys came here. So I think we're going to see that more consistently, and that's definitely another step that I think will not only help like him and the team on the court, but just the overall perception of who he is as a player.
All right, we have to bring up health if we're talking about off court and Booker being dominant this year. People don't like when I do this. I see the comments, folks, but I don't wish it, but it's my job to analyze what's going on. And the reality is that Booker tends to have at least one kind of soft tissue thing in his lower body every year. But I don't know if I'm making the case, Brandon, that it won't be as bad this year. This is the most restful offseason he's had since pre-COVID, since Monty's first summer here. Second round exit. He ended the year healthy, which he hasn't done. He didn't do it after the Dallas series, and obviously the 2021 with the finals and then the Olympics. He basically didn't have an off season. And then this past year was also the first normal, regular, scheduled NBA season in years, right? So even going through that, coming out of it healthy, a longer off season because unfortunately they lost early. To me, that all kind of would add up to as good a chance as any to have a healthy year. We know this dude does everything he needs to be committed to his health. Like, read any interview with him about his process with that stuff. I have no doubts. Hopefully he doesn't try to come back early again. Like, that would be nice, right? Because that obviously put him back last year. It's just kind of hard to guess, but I do think the offseason being pretty smooth for him should help. I mean, it's better than the alternative, at least.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt to have more rest. Obviously, there's stuff that can happen that's just kind of outside of your control as a player, but the preparation, I think, is never really an issue with him. Like, one thing I would say is, like, hopefully he added like some more yoga into his regimen or something this offseason. Like, both him and DA,
pool
like, just
work,
for
maybe.
flexibility. just something to help with like just those tissue injuries. But you honestly though, like a lot of that stuff is just wear and tear and maintenance and stuff like that. So I think it's just impossible to predict. But when you have the track record of these things flaring up, like you said, like people can get mad all they want, but it's just the reality of assessing a player that is, and his health is so vital to this team's success as well. And not only that, but his potential run at an MVP if he's going to take that leap and be a top 5 player in the league. So I think it's an important discussion. Obviously it's there's same with Durant and Beal. Like there's 3 guys that you don't know how many games you're going to get out of them. I don't think Booker is it's not as much of like defining who he is as far as like the health issues yet, but there are some concerns there that seem to pop up every year.
Yeah, plus 1,700 at FanDuel for MVP. To me, I think like he has as good of a case as anyone outside of Jokic, Luka, and Giannis. I would put probably those 3 at the top in terms of how good I think their team is going to be and how integral and fundamental they're going to be to their team being the best that they can be. But to go back to the health side of this, I think I don't want to be naive, but I was really trying to think like there's just been this assumption. It's like, well, Booker already has this stuff and now he's going to be doing even more. So he's going to be even more likely to get hurt. And I was like, is that even really true? I don't know. Like I don't see his role this year, as we just talked through pretty much every angle of it, being much harder on him physically than what he's done in the past. Like his usage rate actually went, I know usage isn't everything because he was passing more, but his usage went down a little bit from the regular season to the playoffs last year, even with how great he was. And his assist percentage went a little bit up. So it pretty much evened out, but he wasn't really doing that much more, all things considered. And defensively, yeah, switching and fighting guys and doing whatever, that's going to come with some physical toll, but I don't know. It's just, you just are healthy or you aren't. Like I kind of just, come down to it that way. I think he's doing everything he needs to be. And I think that, lessons learned from previous seasons should help, but
I've
never know.
More of a stronger take on that. Like, I think this will be the easiest season of his career, hands down. It's not even going to be close. Like, just you look at having Durant and Beal, like the main thing with him his entire career is like leading up to like before that KD trade is like he's always been their only shot creator. Like you go back. I mean, Chris Paul obviously he'd have his moments, and I don't want to discredit him at all. But I think now having even Gordon off the bench, like the Suns can survive with him on the bench longer than they've been able to in the past. So I feel like just from a minutes and workload standpoint, like there's going to be some games where he might stay on the bench longer than he'd probably like. But if the team will have a comfortable lead, or Beal will be hot or Durant will be hot, and they just don't. There's not as much of a desperation to play him, 42, 43 minutes, which we've seen so often throughout his early career. So I think there's obviously
he could also stop doing that in the regular season. That's him.
Yeah,
he pushes for it. Like that would be one thing I would say. Like, cool off on that, please. Yeah,
that is very true. So, but it's just that competitive edge he has. So it's I don't think that's ever going to change. But I think obviously if they're winning by 20 or something and more frequently this season, hopefully, then there's going to be games where he'll get more rest. So I think just having Beal and Durant changes the entire dynamic of the minutes workload, hopefully. So that's my case. I think it's going to be
I like
a lot wider. Yeah.
I like it. I mean, he played the first year when Chris was at his peak when he first got here, 33.9 minutes per game. Last year and the year before, 34.5 both. So, that's, let's say, a minute per game, 82. Like maybe he can get it even closer, to let's say 100 minutes shaved off. Like that's not nothing, So that would be another angle for it. And what he's doing when he's out there, if he's not, it's a lot different when you run a quick pick and roll and launch it over to, Bradley Beal, who attacks a closeout and gets a layup, than it is to like pound the ball into infinity and, launch a contested mid-range jumper like that. That was what he was doing a lot. So I hear you. I think that's actually a great point too, but that will wrap us up. That is the pathway for Devin Booker to be a top 5 player. And I think if he does everything we talked about, he's going to get a lot of MVP votes, and the Suns will be in a pretty good spot. But, none of that is a given. We'll see how it fares. That was question number 1. Question number 2 will be tomorrow. We're back daily. I think I might talk Beal tomorrow. I'll probably be solo, but keep an eye out. We're doing one a day for the next 13 shows, and gonna have some guests, gonna have some big pictures, some nitty gritty stuff, some analytics, some eye tests, whatever you want. It'll be here. Hit follow, hit subscribe, become an everydayer. Check out Brandon's writing and the team over at Bright Side of the Sun, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.